Hello friends, once again welcome back to our vedio videos. Today our topic of discussion is generic drugs compared to branded drugs. There are a lot of myths outside regarding these generic drugs. Some say that the approval process for generic drugs is less stringent. Generics somehow work differently compared to that of branded drugs. The standards of quality in manufacturing of branded drugs is much higher than that of standards of quality of manufacturing of generic drugs. Some say that the price difference between generic drugs and branded drugs is very little, so play it safe and go to branded drugs. While some other claim that the price of generic drugs is very low compared to that of branded drugs because their quality of standards of manufacturing is very less. So, based on all these myths, the basic question arises. Is it safe to go for generic medicines? Or is it safe to switch a person from branded drugs who is already taking branded drug to a generic medicine? Let me clear all of these doubts. First of all, what is a brand drug and what is a generic drug? When a drug company invents a new drug, they sell it for an expensive price because they might have spent some millions of billions of dollars for its research and advertisement. And they can call that drug they have invented with any brand name they want to call. When the patent term of that innovator drug is over, any other manufacturing company can manufacture that drug by applying for an ANDA. Let me take you back to a few decades to understand this clearly. In early days in United States, there was an act called Federal Food, Drug and Cosmetics Act, which made it possible for the generic companies to manufacture these generic drugs by getting regulatory approval after filing for an ANDA. But in 1980s, the experts in our field discovered that very few generics are coming into the market. Where is the problem? The experts studied the issue and realized that under patent and regulatory law, it is very easy for the innovator companies to make it difficult for the generic companies to successfully file an ANDA. And also the regulatory pathway for ANDAs get approved was irregular and most kind of uncertain. As a result, a new act was formed called the Drug Price Competition and Patent Terms Restoration Act. It is also informally known as the Hatch-Waxman Act. It came into force effective from September 24, 1984. This act is a US federal law which encourages the manufacturing of generic drugs by pharmaceutical industry. This act was established as a modern system of government generic drug regulation in the United States. This is a brief look back into the history of generic drugs and branded drugs. So, as per this act, Drug Price Competition and Patent Terms Restoration Act, any company manufacturing generic drug must show that their generic drug is bioequivalent to branded drug. So, what does this bioequivalent means? Bioequivalent means the generic drug that is manufactured by generic companies should have the same active ingredient, the same dose, the same route of administration, and also the same rate and extent of absorption of the active ingredient that compared to that of branded drug. But the generic drugs look different to that of branded drugs in terms of size, shape and color. The reason behind that is that the generic drugs are allowed to use different fillers to actively bind that active substance in it. The problem is these filler materials that are used to hold the active ingredient in generic drugs may affect how the tablet gets dissolved and absorbed inside our body. To overcome this problem, the generic drugs must be proved that their rate and extent of absorption is equal to that of branded drug. Let me explain you this concept by using a small graph. When you take a tablet, it gets absorbed gradually and the concentration in blood increases until it reaches peak. And then the concentration starts decreasing as the body starts metabolizing and getting rid of the drug. The extent of absorption is termed as AUC, that is area under the curve, and the rate of absorption can be represented by this peak, and we call it as Cmax. The generic company hires a group of people and gives them the drug to be tested. The blood samples are obtained from them to measure the concentration of the drug in blood at various times. From these numbers, AUC and Cmax are calculated. And to ensure the precision of these numbers, a 90% confidence interval is calculated. And let me explain what is this 90% confidence interval. This 90% confidence interval gives us a range that if you were to repeat the same experiment once again, there is a 90% of chance that average Cmax and AUC will lie within this limit. The medical experts in FDA have specified that this 90% confidence interval of AUC and Cmax of generic drug must lie entirely within the range of 80 to 125% of AUC and Cmax of that of branded drug. Let me explain you in simple terms. For example, if our brand drug takes 10 minutes to reach peak concentration in our blood and the generic drug takes the time of anywhere between 8 to 12.5 minutes to reach peak concentration, it means that both brand and generic drugs are pretty much similar in time it takes to reach peak concentration in blood. It is very simple. If the confidence interval of generic drug lies within the range, it will get approved. If it is outside the range, it will not get approved. And once again, the basic question arises. Does this all mean that generic drug and branded drug are different and we shouldn't be switching between them? Well, not quite. It depends upon the therapeutic index of the drug in question. What is this therapeutic index? Therapeutic index is a ratio between the dose that causes the toxicity in half of the population over the dose that produces desired therapeutic effect in half of the population. A large therapeutic index implies that there is a wide range of concentration of drug in the blood that would achieve the desired therapeutic effect. And a small therapeutic index implies that there is a small range of concentration that achieves the desired therapeutic effect. So, switching a drug with small therapeutic index between the brand and generic is a kind of risky thing because the new concentration might be outside the narrow range of desired concentrations. On the other hand, switching a drug with large therapeutic index from brand to generic might be safe because even if the generic drug achieves a concentration little varying from that of brand drug, it might be still within the desired therapeutic range. Because in medicines, the amount absorbed is very crucial in order to determine if it works well or if it becomes toxic inside our body. Well, once again, let us go back to the myths or confusions which we had regarding these generic drugs and solve them one by one. First one was, the generic drugs undergo less stringent approval process when compared to that of branded drugs. Well, the answer is that according to FDA, generic drugs are required to have the same active ingredient, the same strength, dosage form and route of administration as that of brand name product. And the FDA approval process doesn't change depending on whether the drug in question is a generic or a brand name drug. The second myth was generic drugs somehow work differently in human body compared to that of brand name drugs. Well, the answer is already told. The FDA requires generic drugs to prove bioequivalency with that of brand name drugs, meaning that it works in the body in the same way as that of brand name products. And the third myth is that the manufacturing standards of generic drugs are less compared to that of manufacturing standards of brand name products. While the answer is, all generic drug producers are required to follow the same quality standards for making, testing and packaging the drugs as that of brand name drug manufacturers. And the most common misinterpreted myth is that generic drug makers sell their products at vast low price because their quality is less. Sounds funny. The answer is simple. They do not need to recover any initial investment which they have spent on research and development for expensive clinical trials, nor they do not need to recover from any multi-million-dollar TV commercials and manufacturing campaigns as usually the most branded drug companies do. Instead, the generic drug makers can pass on these cost savings onto the patient. And the last and most commonly asked question is that, is it safe to switch a person from a brand name product to a generic name product? Well, the answer is absolutely yes if the drug in question is a large therapeutic index product. But we have to be more cautious while switching a person from a brand name product to a generic name product if the drug in question is a narrow therapeutic index product. Thanks for watching.